Ben Riggs presents D&D Out Loud, Episode 102, Be Afraid of This Game. Greetings once again, one and all, to D&D Out Loud with Ben Riggs. I am Ben Riggs, apparently controversial D&D historian and author of Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. And over the past 13 years of writing and podcasting, I have met hundreds of creative geniuses in and around the world of tabletop role-playing games. And here on this show, I ask two of these flaming torches of the human imagination to come forth and have a fascinating discussion, which I then record and send out into the world. Today, I have two masters of their craft, two gaming greats, whose work is capable of standing on its own 2 feet and maybe even punching other games in the face, or gutting them like a fish, or blasting them out the airlock, depending on your genre. First up is Luke Gearing. He is one of the Mothership boys over at Tuesday Night Games and is known for Gradient Descent, Fever Swamp, and most relevant to my mind, Wolves Upon the Coast, which I am currently running. Welcome, Luke.
Thank you very much for having me for such a delightful intro.
I try. Second in order, but by no means in significance, we have Kevin Crawford, the man with the mind behind the Without Number line of games. Stars Without Number is my dream campaign, which I seem eternally unable to get my gaming group to play. His successful crowdfunding campaigns outnumber my ex-girlfriends, and his influence on game design in the 21st century has been truly remarkable. He is also very hard to lure into an interview, so I will publicly brag that this is the second time I've managed to seduce him into conversation. Welcome, Kevin.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and you're very kind to invite me.
I credit Luke as the being the bait on the hook for this conversation, and you know, the fact that you have a crowdfunder right now probably doesn't hurt. Can you tell us about your crowdfunding campaign right now?
Well, to be honest, Luke was the bigger draw, but for the crowdfunding campaign, it's for the Book of Unnumbered Worlds. Now, for years, people have been asking me, Kevin, you make these tables with games attached to them. Why not give me an entire book of world building? And eventually I had to acquiesce. So the Book of Unnumbered Worlds is designed to be a little different than the usual world building handbook. There's a lot of them, they give you a lot of very good ideas, large lists of interesting NPCs, novel geographic features, lists upon lists upon lists. And these are very nice. But what a working GM needs is a book that holds their hand through the whole process. Starts with a blank sheet of paper and says, first you do this, and then this, and then this, and here are the tools to help you do each of these things. So a step-by-step process showing you how to create particular things. Geography, people and societies, religions, nations and their histories, monsters and demons, dungeons, cities, villages, all the usual fittings of a campaign. And not just interesting tags or tools or whatnot for them, but how to use these tags and tools.
Well, that sounds very, very cool. I will confess you will have my money. But and that brings me to I think we're going to be discussing a lot of sandbox campaigning today. And Luke, I didn't know that Wolves Upon the Coast existed until we were talking to Leo Hunt, and Leo Hunt was like, "Oh yeah, Wolves Upon the Coast, like the best thing the OSR has ever produced. It's absolutely outstanding." And then I got lucky because just a few months later, it was on Bundle of Holding for just $15, and I'm like, "Okay, go get that." And then I started reading it, and it has blown my socks off. I'm 2 sessions in. I'm really enjoying it. I might have a small player rebellion, as they are like, the combat is brutal, and I'm like, the combat is brutal. Yes, like you gotta think your way around these things. They had one good fight and one bad fight, and they lost 6 of their rowers on the one bad fight. So they're feeling a little salty about it, but I think I'm going to soothe them over and see where this goes. But for people that don't know it and were as ignorant as I was when Leo Hunt first dropped the name, what is Wolves Upon the Coast?
I mean, like, the easy sell is it's like the Viking RPG. You've got like a kind of very loosely based on history, like section of Northern Europe. And you've been liberated one way or the other. The default setting is you're basically ex-slaves who've just murdered their master. So you've got a boat and you've got nowhere to be. So you just need to go out there and make your mark on the world is kind of the default. The main thing about it is rather than focusing on like another OSR system or a bunch of generation tools, I was like, what if I just gave you the output of those generation tools? So it's just a really big hex crawl. I can't remember how many hexes it is now. Too many. I think it was like 300 like written hexes or something crazy like that. I'll check that afterwards. You can correct me. Yeah, it's just a really big hex crawl, a lot of stuff with a kind of very dour tone, I think, is the thing in places. Although, I mean, I don't know if we need to do like a spoiler warning or something. There's some odder stuff going on than you might first think from the kind of the headline, you know.
I would encourage spoiling. I would say, I feel like most of my listeners are DMs or GMs. So if you want to play Wolves Upon the Coast,
Oh.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, that was really weird. I don't know what happened to my video, but you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
I can hear you.
Cube of darkness.
I'm gonna futz with my camera for a minute and note that this happened, but I'm gonna say just keep going because we don't need to see my smiling face. I'm the least interesting person here. So and let's see, let me just confirm we're still recording. We're still recording. I have no idea what's going on.
Oh, now your voice is getting a little odd.
I think most of the listeners are DMs or GMs, so spoil away. So if there's something you want to reveal, just go ahead and reveal it.
Oh, I mean, like, so on the face of it, it looks like kind of like mythic Northern Europe, but there's like a whole hidden like war between Atlanteans and Lemurians. You can go to the moon. Like, it gets pretty wacky, but it's not all that stuff isn't on the surface. It's like one thing I really wanted to know was the idea that there were like actual secrets, both from people in the world and for the players, and even for the GM. A lot of the stuff isn't pointed out until you find it as the GM, which for me makes it really fun and really engaging. Yeah, I don't want to have the summary tell me everything, you know?
Well, I'm curious myself. What prompted the idea of Wolves Upon the Coast?
So, like, I have like in my head a kind of undefined list of like, well, I want to do one of those. So, like, I want to do a hex crawl. I want to do like an investigative scenario, whatever. I want to try and like make the best one of those that I can do. And I was working away at an OD, like my OD&D take. So I'd already done Monsters and at this point, which is like weird OD&D monsters, and I'd started working on and Treasure, which is the treasure book. I was like, well, okay, I'm going to do the rule book. Start working away at it, and I kind of hit the point where it's the hex like generation system. And I was sitting there, I thought, well, I could just restate what was in the OD&D booklets, or I could just like give the answers. I could just give the results rather than like reinventing the wheel or just like restating the wheel, right? Because there's value in finding better ways to do things, but I wasn't aiming at that. I was like, well, just give the results, and then it started off as just the island, and I was like, oh no, like this is going to be the whole thing. So that was 2 years of my life chewing away at one hex at a time, you know.
And Kevin, go ahead and launch away if you have questions. I can give a conversation starter if you want, but again, I try and lean back after a while. So Kevin, feel free, but I can say something if you want me to.
Well, I'm interested in the mechanics of Wolves Upon the Coast and some of the choices you made there. I noticed that you were using a target 20 hit system for one.
Yeah, so I've been running Delving Deeper for a few years now. I do like a Wednesday lunchtime dungeon crawl game. And the people always complain about the Thaco. They complain about like looking up on a table. I also like, I can understand especially when you're corralling like sometimes like 10, 12, 13 players. I don't want to be looking up a table. I just want to be able to add up the numbers and go. So for me, the target 20 is like a good compromise between descending AC, which I do think is legitimately useful, and the simplicity of having just an attack bonus, roll high, roll big number. Also, it became like a minor obsession for a bit of like just how much juice can you squeeze from armor class, which is why like Wolves has like armor class affects your saves. It affects
Your encumbrance.
Yeah, exactly. That was also, it's like my ongoing joke of Wolves isn't a classless game. It has one class and it is fighter.
Can I interrupt to summarize the system for people? Because I agree with Kevin that the system is brilliant. So as you were saying, again, if you don't know, for the people that haven't read this, which I'm assuming is almost everyone listening, in combat, it's rolled it. You need a 20 to hit. You get a +2 bonus starting out. And then you add the armor class of your opponent, which allows Luke to create descending armor class and make it work without having to consult a table. I want to say off the top of my head, 9 is what you have to roll if you're kind of running around naked. And then I think the best armor I can recall off the top of my head was like a 3 armor class, and then it's 2 if you have a shield. Which means, you're hoping to hit 20, you add a +2, you add 2 just for existing, and then you add the armor class of your opponent. You want to roll over a 20, and he also uses armor class for saving throws, encumbrance, and initiative as well.
Yeah.
So again, when you talk about getting juice out of it, again, it's marvelous. It is a thing of beauty. So I apologize for interrupting, but I wanted to let people know the brilliance you're shouting about.
Well, it's also using it for initiative, because like the other thing that you find in like again, like delving deeper, OD&D, whatever, every fighter's rocking full plate and like either a shield or a 2-handed weapon, and like, well, at that point it's not a choice. Like there's never a reason to not be rocking full plate. Whereas trying to make it a bit like almost like a monad, where it's like the only thing that matters about like a person rather than like level. It's like, what army you wearing? It then becomes a choice. It's like, okay, actually against like this enemy, it hits really hard, so it's more important that we all go in naked and try and move really fast and get it down before it even gets a turn. And against other enemies, you'll be like, okay, this is going to be more of an attrition thing, so we'll all like play up, we'll wear the heaviest armor we can afford and try and deal with it that way, rather than it being the case of, which I've often seen, is like every fighter's in full plate unless a player is really dedicated to role playing, in which case their character tends to die earlier. I just don't get to be sad about that, which sucks. That's not a fun time for anyone, right?
Well, I'm also interested in the magic of Wolves Upon the Coast. You're using something novel in your approach to magic there.
So the magic is like, rather than the normal like wizards like prepare spells or whatever, there's like a giant list. So I used the classic D&D ones because like the whole thing started as a rewrite of OD&D. So I was like, okay, we'll just take these spells. I'm generally dissatisfied with like freeform magic systems. I find like it's too much negotiation in play. I just want to get a result and move on, and we can worry about the details later. So it was combining that with this kind of like mythic and quite unpleasant feel that Wolves has. And again, like everyone's a fighter, no one's a wizard. So you have to find either ritual components or like do specific things to cast all spells. And there's like a base level for a lot of them where it's like, okay, you use up this component to achieve this effect. Or if you can find a really rare one or do something horrific, you get to do it once a day, or it becomes like a permanent effect. That was just based on like, I've done a lot of like reading into like historical magical practices, because I've always found there's like a split from like how magic appears in like fantasy literature and in like myth and like legend and just historical kind of sources versus how it appears in like fantasy games. And I wanted to try and make it more literary in that way. That sounds very pretentious, not literary, but more like the literature. So it's kind of an attempt to do that. And then that's another one that kind of became a bit of an obsession, where it's like, okay, like we need to find something that's like suitably symbolically loaded without just being like a one-to-one duplication of a thing that actually existed. Fell into that a bit more with some of the, because also like this is how you improve your saving throws, is like if you want to resist certain types of magic, you go find like the blood of an animal that's associated and like you smear that all over yourself. And it's like that is how magic talismans worked, or was supposed to have worked, right? So it's about capturing that and making the logic of the world that was work in the game system for me, because then that's like cool. Like if in like, I don't know, if you watch like the Northmen and they do like a dance around the fire and go like bear mode and that helps them in their fight, like players should organically decide to do that, and then they get the bonus and they're like, whoa, holy shit, like that's cool as hell. That's like a fun moment for them, for me, hopefully. So that was kind of the aim there, to try and capture that feeling of it being something messier and more real and more tied up in physical reality. Also, it's like the DCC thing of like quest for it. Like if you want to do something, go on an adventure for it. And like some of these more powerful spell effects, it's like, yeah, you got to go on a whole adventure to cast a spell once. And I think that's cool because it's like, oh, we have Fireball, but we only have it once. And we spent like a month of real time working to be able to cast the spell Fireball, so to make sure it fucking counts. I think that's fun. That's like a fun experience for everyone.
Can I read the spell for sleep?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
So sleep, 1 use. A bear's fecal plug is smoked and exhaled once per day. The caster travels through dream and back out again in a single sleep. 2d6 plus 2 creatures are robbed of wakefulness, sleeping for 24 turns if undisturbed. And I didn't know what a fecal plug was.
You led a good life.
Yeah, it's a good one. Like the fecal, because it like, you know, a hibernating bear, like from a kind of symbolic animist view, it's like a hyperpotent symbol of sleep, right? It sleeps all winter. That's like sleep beyond sleep. And when it's done, it shits out its fecal plug. So that's a totem. That's a magic totem right there. I think there's also like, this isn't necessarily on purpose, but there's also a feeling of a few different like styles of magic in the spells. Like that's a druid spell, right? Like you're smoking a bear's shit. That's a druid spell. That's what druids do. Some of the other ones feel like more alchemical or like kind of like almost like celestial in places. Some of them go to like the body horror place with some of the like more like Lemurian influenced stuff. It's fun. It's fun to have different schools of magic, you know?
I'm curious about the process of actually creating Wolves Upon the Coast, the campaign setting. You said you spent 2 years working on this. What was the workflow like?
So on each, so ahead of time, I basically like sketched out a very rough idea of what I wanted each like region to look like. So that's like the islands or like the sections of that continent of the kind of mainland. So I had like very rough notes in my notebook of like, oh, here's like the monsters that would be here, because I had a very limited palette of monsters. One of my rules was like, if a monster appears more than once, it has to be something from the monster manual. I already did. One-off monsters, fine, come up with whatever, but like otherwise it has to be from this quite prescribed list of like 50 odd monsters. So that immediately set up some stuff with the themes, and I had some like rough notes. And then for each one, I would use the hex fill table, which is like 1 to 3, nothing here. 4 is a monster layer, 5 is a settlement, and 6 is just something weird. And I would pre-roll all of the results for that section and note that down in a big document where like each header was the hexfill like code. Put that on the map. Then I would just write them one at a time, and whenever I saw like an easy geographical connection, or like, so like if there was like a settlement next to weird, I was like, well, okay, these two are in communication with each other. Later on, I like codified that into the procedure. But it was just very workmanlike in the approach, where I'd just be like, okay, this one, it's this, and then the next that kind of informs all the future ones. If I spotted like a good opportunity, I'd like skip ahead, write a hex that's like adjacent but like 5 pages down in the document or whatever. But it was very methodical in that way, and just only kind of breaking that as I went. I then went back through and added a few more connections, because otherwise you end up with this weird situation where things only ever connect to things west, because you kind of write them like left to right, as it were. So you have to go back and add connections so it connects out the other way. And sometimes it'd be like, oh, this connects to something on a different, like the different region. So I just make a note in the like header of that region's document, like, oh, make sure you remember the like the evil wizard wants to steal this lady or whatever. Yeah, it was very much like I try not to think about it too much and just focus on like the immediate steps in front of me, because I mean it's huge. Like you can't conceptualize the whole thing at once. You kind of have to just do it a bit at a time.
So let me ask one follow-up question there. So my players are rolling around in Noose. Is that how you would pronounce it?
Noose. Yeah, I love Noose. Noose is really fun.
I'm just going to start in specifics here. Like, the internet seems to think it is Greek and Atlantean inspired. Is that accurate?
Yeah. There's like a failed Atlantean hidden away in Noose somewhere. The guy who shoots the giant eye laser beam, that's an Atlantean, but like one that's kind of like it's one of those things that kind of plays into a lot of the like the older like pulp literature, because it's like the like degenerate remains or whatever is obviously a very loaded term, but it's a fun trick to play with, right? So that's what that guy is. But they've also kind of been supplanted by their alien god Covetose, who doesn't fit neatly into the mythology of wolves, because there is this like whole secret history that like isn't ever spelled out in the text, and like I'll tell people about it, but like they can come up with their own interpretation. Some people have. A few people like, oh yeah, no, in my hyper war they all had mecha, which is like not for me. Like for mine they're all like bio horrors, but and that's fine, that's cool. Like it's fun to play with that stuff. But yeah, Noose is fun. It is definitely, in my mind, it's a colony that was like the Atlanteans physically moved the island, which is why it's like an ahistorical island between like Britain and the kind of like roughly where you'd have like Normandy and whatnot. Because the Atlanteans put it there. That's like the clue. It's ridiculous. Yeah, that's why it's so weird and why they don't share any languages with anyone around. Because you get this in history, right? You get like these linguistic families that aren't related to people around, and that's always interesting. And it's it's because the Lemurians put them there, or the Atlanteans put them there. At least we've got to represent that in our games.
Well, I have to ask then. So, what is your secret history of wolves?
So you start off with there's like the Sea Monster book, which like goes into this a little bit. You start off with the Sea Tyrants, I think is what they're called. I need to look at it again. They're like giant, horrible monsters from under the sea. They kind of enslaved all humans for a bit. And they sucked. So eventually humans learned to like fight them, and they kind of cast them off, as you do. Then like things were chill for a bit. Then you had the Lemurian Atlantean hyper war, because they just hate each other. So they were pretty high tech. So like the Sea Tyrants were like magic, like kind of syllables of command. Atlanteans were like posing as kind of very friendly and like kind of patronizing like saviors of humanity, but was like using them for their own purposes. Lemurians were like they suck. They had like dread sorcery and stuff, but they were honest, so that caused Atlantis to sink that whole war. Most of the Lemurians were wiped out. There's still a few left. There's like a hidden away in Peora. There is a Lemurian that some Atlantean scientists nearly turned into a new god, who's like the edge, but it can't quite do it unless you just, because there's like the Juggernaut, so there's like the Shadow of the Colossus monsters hanging around the Hex Crawl. If you kill those, it unlocks him, so he can go free. So that's pretty fun. So anyway, after the Hyper War, turning this into a conspiracy podcast for you. Then you've got the Giants, who kind of came in whilst like humans were weak. So the Giants kind of ran the show for a bit. And then, as always, again, humans rebelled. We freed ourselves. And then you get the fucking Romans turned up, as they always do. Rome fell, as in our timeline, and then that's kind of roughly where Wolves is. It's kind of like that very post-Roman, like 700, 800 AD, kind of Dark Ages time period. Yeah, that's some of the secret history. I think that's most of it. And then there's also like the tongue god that the cultists worship. The Druids worship in England, but like that's also kind of a demon rather than a god. It's just a subtly different thing, obviously. That's most of it.
Well, I can see why it took a while to build.
Yeah, and like a lot of this stuff, the way I like to work is I like to surprise myself. So I really like having the hex feel like kind of results. I try not to nudge those, and I write it, and like I will be realizing things about the world as I write it, and like realizing which parts in communication, stuff like Lemurians and Atlanteans hate each other. It's like, okay, I just decided that, but like the feeling of like this progressive cycle of like domination, then people rise up and then they become like that was just kind of a theme that presented itself through the work rather than being like a deliberate thing I was deliberately building. If I'm surprised by it, I like to think the reader will be as well. And then once I've discovered something in the text, I can go back and reinforce that and add more stuff to it. But this first time it cropped up, I was like, neat, that's really cool. Like, let's dig more on that and see what more we can find out.
That quality of discovery, the idea of making your own surprises, as it were, I think that's extremely important in world building. And that is something that world builders tend to seek. They love a good idea, but they really love their good idea.
Yeah, well,
that's why they insert mechas, and they keep those mechas, and they are proud of those mechas.
Well, you need like the like. This is why I really like random generation, like your own work, where there's like all this random generation stuff. I think it's a really good thing to have something external to think against. Like if it's just you deciding stuff, it kind of feels a bit phony. It doesn't feel like it's real. Whereas if you just introduce like just enough of an externality, like through dice rolls and a table lookup, it's like, oh, now it's real because I didn't decide all of it. And yeah, that's something like the way outnumber games do really well. Obviously, like Traveller does really well, and just hexfill generators in general are pretty good at. Right, like it's just enough to set you going, and then you can extrapolate a bunch of stuff based on the relationships rather than it all being handed to you or you deciding it.
I think that's an important distinction in that the very process of generation, the steps you take to create something, reify it. They give it substance and feeling because you've done all of this work to make it. So therefore, it must mean something. When you're doing divination, for example, with yarrow sticks in the old ancient Chinese style, you have a pile of 49 yarrow sticks, and it takes you like 18 times of sorting these things through to get one divination result. You're repeating this over and over again. And by the time you finished it, well, you tend to care about what you've just done. You thought about it. You've been sitting here putting yarrow sticks in one pile or another for the past 20 minutes, so you're paying attention to it. And the same thing happens when you use tools online to build something. These tools, the very existence helps reify what you are making. There is the structure that you are operating within, and you are discovering something about the structure that you are inventing. And I think people really are attached to that.
I think the divination comparison is like spot on, right? Because like people talk about the oracular nature of dice, but I think like with generation tools, it's like doubly so. It really because it's revealing something, right? Like the fact there's these mutants next to the fish people, it's like, oh shit, okay, like there's a conversation happening between these elements, and I think the sweat equity you have to put in is a really interesting one because I have found with if a tool does too much, like a computerized tool does too much, I don't feel like it's something I've put the work into, and immediately it's less compelling. And maybe this is just a me thing, but
I think it's common, really.
Right, like because there's a really good one. It like what it does for Stars Outnumber is super impressive. It creates like a whole campaign wiki for it. I can't remember the name of the tool, but it's like crazy how much information it generates, and yet I didn't feel any ownership. And like we still ran it, and it was still like really fun. We had a good time, but I didn't feel like it was my.
Yeah, it wasn't your sector.
Yeah, for sure. And like with a game like Stars Outnumber, where like just with Outnumber line in general, that's important. That's like part of the product, like the USP. Like that's part of why people play these games, right? It's because it's theirs.
I'm going to ask a facile question and ask: Do you know the word count of wolves?
I worked out at one point. It's like hundreds of thousands. It's too many. It's pretty hefty. I think it's like if you do like A5, it's like 300 odd pages, which is like apparently I'm in the business of big books now, but it's pretty hefty. It'll see print eventually. We're working on it. It'll get there.
And God, was Treasures 190 pages?
Yeah, I mean, like, because that one's Diddy, right? Like, it's like A6. I've got it here. So is it there? I've just moved house, so it's not where I think it is.
I was printing a bunch out today, and I was like, okay, maybe I don't print out the Treasures.
Yeah, it's hefty. It's a fun little book because it's so small. That one is like A6, as with monsters. So it it's fun to play with the like one thing per page, but those pages are really small. Kind of keeps things compact, because I think it was a Nabokov or something, like he wrote on index cards or something like that. Which is like a fun way of like conceptualizing ideas, is like packaging them up really small and neat, especially with like magic items. Having them small is important.
All right, I'm gonna jump off of what Kevin said, and we've been talking about creation in a lot of different ways. Is there a difference between when you sat down to create wolves based on these die rolls? Is there a difference in your mind between that and play? I mean, obviously you're not playing with other people, but like, is there the same spirit, for lack of a way of putting it, invoked? Is play creation in your mind?
It's a different sort of like play. Like, it's one of these things where there is an impulse to expand definitions of words, and like, I get it, but also sometimes it's like, it's still useful to understand that they are different things, even though, like, for me, writing is playful. It's very fun, especially something like wolves, where I can be quite nasty and unpleasant. That shit's really fun for me. Like, it's an enjoyable process, and like the work of refining it is also quite playful, because I'm like rewriting sentences 3 different ways, and like, it's a little game to try and make it sound as good as it can. But it's definitely, for me, a very different thing to running or playing a game. Like, when I'm running a game, I'm just trying to not get on with it, but like, there's a very different, like, okay, like, first idea, best idea, we roll with it. I'm always trying to keep momentum up. With writing, obviously, I can like stop, reflect, change it, play with it, and that's for me, it's a very different set of muscles that are being used, and like, just a different part of my brain that I'm playing with.
Well, this has been us just peppering you with questions. Do you want to turn it around and ask Kevin anything?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about Silent Legions, because no one ever talks about that game. And like, it rules. Like, I've got it here.
Can you tell us what it is, Luke?
Silent Legions. I can't show you the cover because I've covered it in stickers, because I'm a child. This was pretty cool. It's got loads of skulls in the back. Anyway, Silent Legions is the without numbers for Eldritch Horror. Kind of, well, I would say Cthulhuid, but like, that's the really sick thing about it, in my opinion, is like the mythos creation tables. They're really good. Like, they're really good. I've been using something like a mythos I wrote up for this for like 8 years at this point, and I just like drop it into works. Like, it's there, and it's really cool. So I wanted to ask about like how, because obviously I feel like for the without numbers line, there's, like I mentioned, like, I want to like do my take on each kind of like genre thing. Is that like a deliberate thing with the without numbers game, where you're like, I want to do a fantasy one and a horror one and a sci-fi one? Is that like very deliberate, or?
That is extremely deliberate. And just the other day, my art director, they were telling me, you ought to do another Silent Legions. You ought to do a modern version of a Silent Legions. And I've been thinking about it.
Yeah. What would you change? Because like, I mean, I can give a quick overview of the book. I've got it in front of me, but like, I'm curious as to what the modernization would mean for you.
Well, it's sort of like the modernization I did between Other Dust and Ashes Without Number. Other Dust was very much a Fallout-esque, far future, Gamma World-inspired version of a game, whereas Ashes Without Number covered that kind of post-apocalyptic game, but also zombie horror apocalypse, and also near-future social collapse apocalypses. So 3 different genres in one book.
Mm.
So for Silent Legions, I might, for example, expand the genres in it. In one hand, you have Lovecraftian horror, where you build your own mythos, and in the other hand, you might have classic urban fantasy horror, where you're vampires and werewolves crawling around and doing unpleasant things to people. One might be, for example, a modern urban fantasy angle, where you have the traditional fedora-wearing wizards and various unsavory supernatural creatures going around in bars. Could do it that way. But I think Silent Legions, for one, was a relatively smaller footprint book. It wasn't nearly as long as, for example, Worlds Without Number.
Mm.
And when you're dealing with strictly Lovecraftian material, the mythos is important. I mean, having all these gribblies and horrors and so forth, that's important. People like that. But beyond that, you have to think about ways in which those gribblies matter. Because if you have a typical Azathothean nameless entity swirling at the center of the cosmos to an unholy piper and so forth and so on, what does that exactly mean in play? I mean, how do you turn that into a game? What is entertaining about that specific mythos creature? What problems does it create? What do its followers look like? What problems do they create? What don't you understand about it? What are you wrong about it? And creating a mesh of facts and reality around that central point that can be turned into playable content. That a GM can say, okay, I've got this horrible demon god here. I've got these adventure tools here. I'm going to take the facts from one, feed them into the other, and put together an actual adventure that I can play with my friends next Tuesday night. And that takes a lot more tools than you've got room to put in like 128 pages.
For sure. I mean, that's like a machine that produces the investigations based on like what you can plug in. That's huge because the sandbox framework in Silent Legions, it's like an interesting one because it's very much based more around that like sceneful play is what it feels like. It's trying to hybridize sandbox and scene-based play is what it felt like to me when I was reading through it, which I understand why that's required. But I think something like what you're describing now certainly appeals more to my sensibilities, where it is that like, no, you just can roll up the machine as and when you need it, and it can kind of respond a lot more flexibly to what the players are doing and the facts on the ground, which is very appealing.
Having a sandbox Lovecraftian game is difficult on multiple levels because Lovecraftian adventures are almost all investigatory in nature. And an investigation has a very linear structure. There is an end point at which the players are ideally supposed to get to. It's not something you can get halfway through and then decide, okay, we're done now, we're going to go over there, and in a month or two we'll come back and maybe pick this up again. That doesn't work that way. So building it so that you can have these investigatory threads running through there, that they can respond in a more flexible way than usual, that takes a lot of infrastructure.
I think there's with something slightly different to your regular Cthulhu mythos, I think there would be something pretty interesting to having, like sometimes they just drop the investigation, they just fail, because it's a sandbox, you don't have to succeed each one. Because one thing that's really fun with the mythos stuff is like failure has like big consequences that don't necessarily hit the players, and having like, again, as part of the machine that you're kind of building out the consequences for failure would be really fun, because that's like, to me anyway, that's the big advantage of campaign play is you can lose and it's not game over. You just failed this thing that you're currently working on. That's really fun. Like some of the best moments have come from like players in a bad situation because they fucked up somewhere earlier down the line. And investigations are great for making mistakes because you just forget stuff.
Yeah.
Like all the time.
I think the players have a real pleasure in that because they know they can afford to fail. And that they don't have any particular plot armor that says you absolutely must reach the last scene of this investigation one way or another. No, that just is not the case. If they win through to that point, they did it because they were smart, they were lucky, they made the right choices, and there's a satisfaction in that.
Yeah, you can't fake it. Well, I mean, obviously you can fake it, but I do think there's definitely a, you can tell, right? Or at least I like to think that you can tell the difference between the real thing and the kind of illusion of having beat it. Like we ran last year, I was running Masks of Nathaliotep, which is a book I have some issues with, but that's fine. But the players won, and they won because they did a really good job. Like they were smart, they were lucky, and they got to the end in not in one piece, but they finished it and they felt great about it, and they knew that I wasn't pulling punches. You know, it's kind of the promise of OSR play. It's not about like dying; it's about the fact you could die. That's far more important than the fact you did or didn't.
With Wolves Upon the Coast, for example, people have mentioned, of course, before that it is deadly, it's dangerous, you get killed fighting. And I think that takes part of the traditional OSR virtue of that no one has any particular protection against the world. That when you succeed, it is the product of your own choices, your own luck, your own decisions. And knowing that the world is so dangerous around you, seeing the evidence of it in the torn up character sheets of your friends, that makes it more satisfying when you actually do pull it through.
Absolutely. And like I think in Wolves specifically, because success begets success, because of the way boasts work. And for those who haven't read, I've caught onto the pattern now. No worries, Ben. You basically, if you want to do something, you say, "Hey, I'm going to do this," and you immediately get some extra 2-hit or hit dice, whatever you want. And as long as you make a good go of it, you keep it. If you fail, you lose it, but you can try again. If you wuss out, then you can never boast again. So you kind of, if you say you're going to do something, you have to commit. But because of that, you get to slowly build up how badass your character is and take on bigger and bigger threats. But each time it's a gamble. Each time you're saying like, no, I'm going to do this thing in front of people, and you have to go and do it, or else everyone thinks you suck for the rest of your life. But that does, because you have to escalate, you kind of always retain that edge of danger. Like, yeah, sure, you tore a were-whale in half or whatever, but like now you got to fight a dragon because that's the next biggest thing, And it's like, fuck, I still got to be clever and smart. And I think that's the joy of it's like lethality. It's not high player death necessarily, or no player's death, no character death. Not necessarily killing all the characters. Yeah, just having them in a position where they could, and they know it, and you know it. It's good fun.
Yeah, I explained the boast system at the end of session 1. In session 2, the players were immediately like, "How do we game this system? Like, how can we make our boasts boast worthy, but also to our greatest advantage?" Which, again, I thought that was great, that it wasn't just like, take 2 XP or whatever, and that they're thinking about it, and I anticipate it starting to drive story and plot. But they're so far they are very afraid of, but if I fail, like,
Yes.
it all goes sideways. And again, it's stakes, right? Like,
Big time.
They are a little afraid of the stakes right now. But again, I think it's good. We're all in our 40s. We've been playing for decades. Like, it's good to be in a place where you're a little afraid of your game.
I think it drives some interesting behaviors as well, because there's like some little wrinkles to the boast. Like, if Ben boasted that he could take Kevin in a fight, I could be like, I bet you couldn't do it with one hand. And then the boast gets bigger, so you get an extra hit dice. But you could say like, "No, you're right, I couldn't, but I bet you could." And then I have to do it. And if I shirk the boast, then I can't do it again. Which you can get some interesting kind of player versus player, but also you could like game the system that way, right? Where you're like, I know that you can do it one-handed, but I'll bet you can't, sort of thing. One thing I haven't heard about anyone doing that I did anticipate was you can do that to NPCs. You can try and egg an NPC into boasting that they'll do something, or they can do it to the player characters. Where a guy hates you, and again, you said, "I'm going to go kill the dragon." He's like, "Do it without a weapon," and you're like, "Oh fuck, we hate this guy." Now I'm going to look like a tit if I don't do the boast that he's kind of challenged me to. It's fun. Like, it also captures, because like a big part of Wolves is kind of this like the very like machismo of like Vikings, how foolish pulling off stupid stunts can be. Like, it's fun, but like it's stupid. Like, obviously the right answer is to say no. You can't. Yeah, then you're not a member of the society anymore. So there's like a fun bit of commentary that you could read into it there as well.
I guess I should ask Luke, do you have any other questions for Kevin? And again, I have stuff I can say, so don't feel pressure.
I suppose the big one, obviously, you have like a very established technology, if you like, for your games at this point. Insofar as like you have the tables where you roll all of the main polyhedrals. You have a pretty established kind of like skill and hit dice system. Is that something that you ever feel like kind of like a little constrained by working within the same thing, or is it just like, I don't have to reinvent the wheel? Great, I don't have to think about it.
Well, there are times when it is constraining, of course. There are some things that system is simply not built to do. For example, Mothership. I mean, the whole stress mechanic, the whole ecosystem around that. Silent Legions doesn't do that. That's not what it does. But at the same time, one has to recognize that simply being introduced to other mechanics, simply seeing them in the wild, does not actually make you competent to use them. There are a lot of designers that say, oh, that's a wonderful idea. I'll just take it and put it in my system. They don't understand it. They don't understand the consequences, the ramifications, the interactions with the other rules, the table culture involved in it. And I understand OSR rules. I understand BX. I know how it works. I know very well how it works. If I see someone else's clever idea and I scoop it up, oh, I'll just put it in my game, I'm going to make some mistakes with it. And sometimes that's perfectly justifiable. You have to make mistakes to do anything better. But I prefer to make my mistakes around my home table and not in a Kickstarter that's $100,000.
So would you say there's like almost like a lag time between your like home table published work, where it's like, okay, well, like the home table, they're like 2 years ahead. They're like cutting edge. And then the stuff that kind of makes the cut is what filters into the kind of the published work.
Partially there is, yes. My home game, I've had a home campaign running for like 5 or 6 years now. And we get together every couple of weeks. And originally for the first 3 weeks, we played BX. I mean, we didn't play any of my games.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually they wanted to play Worlds Without Numbers, so we converted over to that. And I've been throwing things out to them, and I've been seeing how they respond to certain mechanics, and I've been getting play table experience with what these things do. For example, the stress system in Ashes Without Number, that was the I saw how that worked at the table, and that influenced how it came out in the book. But a lot of it is also just listening to designers like you and seeing what you're doing. I don't generally like talking to designers because, while it can be very educational, it's a lot more educational to just look at what they did, read their games, see them play, because they will tell you truths that the designer themselves will not even recognize in some case, let alone talk about.
There's definitely a difference between the design is conceptualized by the writer and then actually what exists at the table, right? Because yeah, no, I think that's a very astute observation. Like, because also like the work should speak for itself to some degree, right? It's like it's the David Lynch meme where they're like, oh, can you expand about your movie? And it's like, just watch the movie. That's what it's about. Like, that's like true. That's there's also, for better or worse, well, for worse, a lot of people talking about their games is just marketing at the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it becomes that. And as such, it kind of behooves you to not lie, but like people aren't necessarily going to be as direct as they might otherwise be about what the game does and doesn't do. And again, sometimes they're not aware, like you said, which is something I've definitely noticed. Hell, I'm sure I've done it. Like,
yeah. I mean, when you make your living writing things that people want to read, there's always an overwhelming encouragement to say what they want to hear. I mean, when a mortgage payment is dependent upon the success of a product, all sorts of things start to look really reasonable.
Yeah, you got to be strict with yourself, definitely, because like I certainly try and like not say anything that isn't true about any of my work, at least not on purpose. I'm sure it's happened. But yeah, it's doing it for a living definitely changes your relationship. Some of this stuff, especially, I mean, one thing that's always very impressed about yourself, Kevin, is like you don't get in fights, you don't post, and I've always really respected you for that, because it's like, yeah, he's just doing the work. He doesn't give a fuck about like me getting into like another scrap on Twitter or whatever. And that's like, it's nice to see that someone can do that and be successful without having to do any kind of like parasocial bullshit. Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
It makes life easier in so many ways. I don't have to say anything about anything. I give game tech support. You ask me what this modifier means or how this rule works, I'll be happy to say, and that's all I'll talk about.
Is it ever hard to hold yourself to that rule? Has there ever been a time where you just want to be like, nah, you're wrong, like to somebody, something like that? Or have you been pretty good about it?
It's never been a temptation. You just look at Twitter. See what happens when you have to be right.
Yeah. Oh, it's not good. It is a disease. It's a sickness. It really is.
I I've always
I mean,
liked
Ben,
very old Chinese philosophical books, like the Five Classics and so forth, volumes written 2,000 years ago and so forth. And there's a popular impression that it's all, fortune cookie material, all these inscrutable phrases, but it's not. It's practical life experience of how to deal with all sorts of things that people run into in life. And simple principles like don't give people advice when they don't ask for it. Things like that. Don't try to point out people's errors. They don't like it.
Yeah. I've only had learned these lessons, and I won't. I think the last time it happened, someone was like, "Man sticking hand in wasp's nest complains of stings." It's not wrong. If you what was the kind of like transition for yourself from being just kind of like a hobbyist to someone who like produces work for others to read? Because I don't recall seeing a like blog presence or anything, or maybe I just missed it, but I don't remember seeing a blog presence before Stars Without Number kind of appeared.
Never had a blog presence, really. 15 years ago, I wanted to learn how to use InDesign because I'd enjoyed doing book layouts. And the early OSR game Terminal Space had come out. And I thought, well, I need some sort of material to actually practice layout with, so I will write a role-playing game. And I wrote it up, and it seemed to be popular online. People were mentioning it, and okay, I'll put it on DriveThruRPG. And that just happened to be the month that DriveThruRPG started doing POD printing. And I thought, well, why not put a POD of it together? And I hit at exactly the right time to be one of the earliest games to have a POD available. And then when I did the free PDF version plus the bonus paid version, that started drawing people's money. And then when I realized that people would pay me to do this sort of thing, well, that was a strong encouragement to start writing. And for about the next 5 or 6 years, I would get home from my work, I would go to my computer, and all night, all I would do was write. And at that point, I eventually started making more money than my day job was paying me. I thought, why am I here? So I'll just go home. I can go back home. I don't have to stay here anymore. So I did. And then for the past 9 years, it's all been supporting me here.
I do love I think print on demand is kind of like looked down upon in some circles. And I think it's a shame because like, I think there's something really cool about the fact that there's no like startup capital required. And like, obviously the print is making money per print. They're like the rates aren't great, but you've got no financial risk there. There's no capital at risk. You're just, you want it? Like someone else will handle that and I'll get some scratch out of it. I think there's something kind of lovely about the infrastructure of it and how democratizing it is. Like obviously there's still like slop and like bad stuff out there, but like you can just not look at it to a degree. I love the fact it was all because like you just happened to be one of the early adopters of POD.
Oh yes,
that's crazy.
I mean, a certain degree of quality is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You have to have the luck too.
Oh yeah, quality is no like guarantor of success, right? Like it is just you get lucky once and then it becomes easier to get lucky the next time, which is like it's such horseshit, but it's the way it goes. There's no way around it.
Have there been moments of luck for your career, you think?
Oh, constantly, yeah. Like the fact because it all started with the Fever Swamp publication by Melsonia, because that was when I was at university. I was like 19 at the time, and I was at the bottom of my overdraft, and I was like, I really want a pack of cigarettes. So I'll write this module and see if Melsonia will take it. And the fact they said yes, I'm very lucky, and it did well enough to be like, I keep doing this, and then getting the ENnie for that meant again like success begets success, right? Like once you had something that people have said that's good, then the ball starts rolling from there. Then obviously being able to cut over to full time just from like because Jarrett knew Sean sort of thing. It was like, you should hire Luke to do Gradient Descent, and then that created that working relationship. And then obviously that led to the full time job. So again, it's just luck. And I don't like the term networking because it sounds very like
It's corporate.
Yeah, right. It's awful. But like, just talk to people and make friends with people, and don't try and like be like, oh, this person's like a big name. Like, make friends with people at your level, right? And then they will help you as they help themselves. Like, it's and that's not just luck. Like, it's because there's luck and there's preparation, right? And you have to be ready to take advantage of the opportunity when it comes. Like, if you've got a backlog of work when the good opportunity comes, great. Suddenly there's a lot of attention on that, and that's the key part. You can't just wait for your break. You have to be preparing for it as well, I think. Like yourself, you had a product ready to go when POD happened to come around. It's like, bang, done, great.
To seize the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
So to wrap things up, I'm going to ask both of you the same question. Luke, what are you reading and what are you running?
I'm rereading Moby Dick at the moment because it's the best book ever written, I think.
Okay, favorite chapter?
I really like the one where I can't remember the specific chapter, but the one where they're massaging the sperm oil, and it's talking about how they're all holding hands. That shit rules. That shit's so good. It's such a good book. It's crazy. In terms of what I'm running the Shrike Leo Hunt's module for my in-person group, and that's been a blast. That's really good fun. I think they're currently trying to assassinate one of the Archons, because they're trying to, each player is becoming like a demi prince of hell. It's pretty fun. It's good module. It's good fun. Recommend.
All right, Kevin, same question. What are you reading? What are you running?
Well, I'm reading Chong Yagong's Admonitions on Governing the People, which is a 19th century handbook for magistrates in Korea. And it's one of my favorite books. It's the fourth time I'm reading it. It's just so full of useful information. I mean, this is exactly how you set up a famine camp. This is the recipe for the food you're cooking here. This is how your clerks are going to cheat you. This is the way they steal. This is the way they lift the wax seals off the documents and replace them. So look for this.
Can you repeat the name again?
Chong Yagong's Admonitions on Governing the People.
I mean,
he's a Confucian idealist. Tassan, he is one of his pen names. Confucian idealists, 100% sterling sentiments, but he's got to deal with all these people, and they are not idealistic.
I teach by day, and this is sounding, this is evoking memories and feelings. It's, like, this is exactly the book I would want as a teacher. Like, okay, yeah, here's curriculum. Here's how the kids will lie. Like that's the useful stuff. And so, what are you running, Kevin?
Well, I'm running a Cities Without Number / Ashes Without Number campaign with my home group there. They're survivors of the Boston deletion, cast into the far future of the latter Earth, and the only humans who can actually use technology on the planet. Only works for them. So now they've got a starving Boston around them, and they have to survive that.
Sick.
So I have to ask, why are they the only humans that can use technology?
Oh, the legacy banned things like firearms and internal combustion and all those others for people of that world. But because they come from the past, they're not under those limits. Of course, their children will be, so they have one generation in which to pull something off before things will get very unpleasant for them.
That's so fucking fun. I love that.
So, Kevin, you have the Kickstarter for... I'm sorry, I forgot the name. I'm on the Kickstarter.
Book of Unnumbered Worlds.
The Book of Unnumbered Worlds. Luke, did you just finish one?
I was finished one in October. I put out a little free adventure just like yesterday. It's like 7 pages. It's on the blog. I've not got anything to show. I just like coming on podcasts. People have to listen to me. It's great.
I mean, it's funny. I was on your blog and I was looking at the adventure, and it's for use with a system called Violence.
Oh, we'll have to talk about Violence. So there's another system also called Violence, and I forgot about it, and it's very funny. And then I made my own system called Violence. People always conflate the two, and they're very different. And it's very entertaining and very annoying all at the same time. We'll do a podcast about Violence.
Okay. We'll do a separate podcast about Violence.
Yeah.
Well, I cannot thank you both enough for taking the time to be on here. I really appreciate it. This has been an absolute joy.
It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good conversation.